I love the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie tie-in game for the Xbox 360. It is some of the most fun I have ever had playing any game in my life, and you wouldn't believe the gallons of digital blood I've spilled. I've committed crimes against humanity, and I've enjoyed it. From the violence and rage and blood on display, to the torn clothing, the wounds so deep you can see the shine off metal-coated bones, the feral screams, and the cheesy tough guy talk Hugh Jackman does so well, Insomniac would be foolish to ignore this for their upcoming game. There is nothing else that comes this close to capturing the ultimate Wolverine experience, but I don't think this is as good as it can get. The potential for greatness is there with Wolverine, and I trust that Insomniac has the talent to pull it off. I just hope that someone on their team pushed them to really study this underrated gem, to see what made it so damn good, but also to understand the areas where it fell short, so they can step in a decade and a half later and innovate. So that's what this video is about. The 3 things I hope Insomniac rips off from X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the 3 things I hope their game improves upon. Pretty niche video, right? The 23 people watching this, I did it specifically for you. Ripoff number 1. Get weird with it. Despite how relatively grounded the Origins movie was, this game had the guts to get real X-Men-y with their storytelling. So much so that the story of this game greatly improves what was present in the movie. Hell, the entire game is bookended by Wolverine in an apocalyptic future fighting against Sentinels. This is a plot point that has absolutely nothing to do with the movie, but is quintessential X-Men, and I respect the hell out of it. The added levels exploring Tresk's facility and battle with a skyscraper-sized robot that ends with both it and Wolverine plummeting into the Earth like 2 asteroids is insane, but feels right at home in an X-Men tale. And that's just one chapter. The entire flashback sequence in Africa has Wolverine fighting against a seemingly infinite number of mutants with funky powers, which kept the gameplay scenarios unique and engaging. Dudes who can multiply, giant rock monsters, mini human torches, blue babes with teleporting powers. Wolverine lives in a world of the uncanny and astonishing. Incorporating that into basic goons helps to solidify his life amongst the extraordinary. This is not nearly as weird as things could have gotten. I think Insomniac should show a little restraint, but also be sure to embrace some of the more outlandish aspects of the source material to really plant their flag with a unique Wolverine experience. Improve number 1. The setting. While Origins Wolverine did a fair job taking the player to different locations, the levels themselves had a sense of sameness to them. Most of the levels are in some top-secret military facility or out in the woods/jungle. You can turn down the wrong corner to discover an Easter egg or collectible, but that's as far as exploration goes. While we don't know too much about Insomniac's game, in the teaser, the bar that Wolverine's sitting in is a famous one in Madripoor. So, odds are the game will partially take place in the fictional Southeast Asian city, which is already very different from what's come before. However, my immediate concern is that the game will only take place in that city. I don't need every superhero game to be an open world. I appreciate some good old-fashioned levels. While Madripoor could serve as a fantastic in-game hub that's somewhat explorable, I don't want to spend all my time riding Wolverine's sweet hog through the city's streets. I think a superhero like Wolverine, who has no real traversal abilities, is better served in a game that takes that into account, rather than forcing him into an open world with contrived mechanics. Besides the gameplay implications, Wolverine works so well as a globe-trotting adventurer. He's not Spider-Man or Batman, limited to just one city. I want to see Wolverine in Madripoor, in Japan, in the American Midwest. Go nuts with it. He's a character that can thrive just about anywhere, and with his long life, he reasonably could have developed connections with people all over the world, which could keep a rotating cast of fun characters at his side, despite his location. As long as the majority of the game doesn't take place in a mysterious military base, I'll be happy, but I think one of the hardest parts about developing this game will be pinning down exactly where the player wants to see Wolverine travel to. I don't envy that job. It'll be tricky. Ripoff number 2. Versus Mode. Versus Mode in Origins Wolverine was a game type I played over and over again as a kid. It's essentially just a Jackman on Jackman bloodbath locked in some sterilized room, but the gameplay was so fun because you could brutalize your opponent who had the same exact abilities as you. The fight could last a while, with each Logan whittling away at the other's health bar. You could also choose which version of Wolverine you wanted to play as. Yep, that's right. This game had its own limited suit unlocks before it was mainstream, cool, and way too focused on. The only downside to these versus battles was the setting, but luckily there were a handful of similar boss fights within the main game. The first battle with Sabretooth is so memorable. It takes place in the rain and mud outside a bar somewhere in the Northwest. Piles of lumber surround the brothers as they tear into each other, able to impale their opponent on surrounding environmental hazards. There are a couple of other boss battles, but the ones that allow Logan to go all out in somewhat of an equal matchup were always the most fun because they took the satisfying, brutal gameplay and let you run wild with it. Unlike some of the other boss fights, which involve deflecting playing cards or riding a fat boy through a grocery store. I think Insomniac needs to copy this game type and expand upon it. It shouldn't be limited to a bland room and to single player. There should definitely be an option for 2-player battles so you can share the experience of a mostly single player game with a friend. The fun of playing as Wolverine is pushing his healing factor and brutality to the limits, and the versus mode allowed the player to do that whenever they wanted, rather than having to engage in a limited number of boss battles throughout a 10-hour-long campaign. Please, steal this idea. Improve number 2, the villains. This is another area where Insomniac could really take things to the next level. While Origin featured a couple of big villains, like Sabretooth, Trask, and his Sentinels, the other antagonists encountered were limited to Blob, Gambit, Bad Deadpool, Agent Zero, and unending armies of Wendigos and jungle mutants. While none of these are exactly bad, except Bad Deadpool, they didn't really bring any sense of gravitas to the story. Wolverine has such a rich history, pulling in villains from his samurai days in Japan or his time with the X-Men provides a ton to choose from. For fights that fit the viciousness of the versus battles, villains like Lady Deathstrike, Silver Samurai, and Omega Red should be included. For something a little more cerebral, you can bring Logan into conflict with Viper and Ogun, who have direct ties to Wolverine's time in Madripoor, but even Mysterio could reasonably show off his fishbowl. I guess these choices will be limited by when the story takes place in Insomniac's shared universe. If it even is a shared universe. Will the Wolverine game take place after Spider-Man 2, or will it be set earlier? Also, has Wolverine been part of the X-Men? Is he still a member? The answers to those questions will definitely impact which villains can be used, and what Logan's relationship with them will be. But there is one villain above all others that I want to see in this game. The Incredible Hulk. As you probably know, Wolverine's first appearance was in a Hulk comic, with his little kitten mask on. It would be so fun to pay homage to that story, which we already know the Insomniac team is well aware of due to this Easter egg in the teaser trailer. If Wolverine is the first step in expanding out a connected Marvel game universe, why not take the opportunity to pit him against another major Marvel hero? A Wolverine vs. Hulk boss battle would be an amazing spectacle if pulled off correctly, and I think it's something fans would talk about for years to come. Overall, there are just so many villains to choose from, and I'm excited to see a stronger focus on some of the lesser adapted ones. Ripoff number 3. Blood and Pain. Origins Wolverine was just an insane gore fest where Wolverine mutilates, rips apart, and beheads anyone who comes near him in a literal tornado of blood. Insomniac should definitely copy this approach, since the only problem with it is that it didn't go on forever. Seriously, I will never get sick of blasting dudes' heads off with their own shotguns, or ripping machete bros in half, or impaling clueless goons on the various sharp objects littered throughout the map. This video is definitely getting demonetized, but you need to behold this glory for yourself. Liking and subscribing would be helpful though. But more than the blood and gore, which plenty of games have done before, the thing that stands out about Origins Wolverine to me is the pain that Wolverine is constantly in. Hugh Jackman screams his way through this whole game. Even when Wolverine levels up, it seems painful. He's not enjoying it. A major selling point of the game is seeing him mutilated and slowly coming back together. This is a man putting others, and himself, through hell. That sensation of pain is so unique to the character of Wolverine, it's not something that makes sense to implement for just about any other hero. Enduring and pushing through pain is at the core of Wolverine, and somehow Origins Wolverine was able to put that front and center while not bogging the player down with a feeling of sadness. The pain is horrific and brutal, but it's also got a berserker fury to it that matches the character and makes it fun. This sensation of blood and pain, of a brutal world, needs to be lifted right out of this game and dropped into Insomniac's to capture an essential part of the titular character. Improve number 3, the story. While I honestly appreciated where the story of the Origins Wolverine game went, it definitely had a lot of problems. To be fair, it was a tie-in to a movie, and the game clearly focused more on gameplay than delivering a truly masterful narrative, but that's where Insomniac shines. I won't be so bold as to pitch which direction they should take the character, but I do have a couple of requests for what I would really like them to avoid. First off, don't touch Wolverine's origin story. It's such a complicated mess that's better off being vaguely referenced than outright adapted or retold. Plus, we've already seen attempted adaptations of that story 100 times. People already know enough, so unless they have some mind-blowing original take, I'd prefer they steer clear of any Weapon X nonsense. The second thing I want them to avoid is giving Wolverine some tragic romance. While that is a part of who Wolverine is, that particular aspect has come to more or less define the character in media outside the comics. Jean Grey and Silver Fox were major motivators for 5 out of the 7 core Wolverine movies. While I'm not opposed to the idea in general, I don't think it should be central to Insomniac's first outing with the character. That's it. Those are my 2 requests. Unlike with Spider-Man, a character who's gone through 4 major movie franchises, 5 if you want to separate Tom Holland's Avengers appearances from his own trilogy, Wolverine hasn't had multiple interpretations or multiversal parallels, or even different actors in mainstream media. A Wolverine game has a far bigger lift than a game focusing on Spider-Man or Batman, because the game cannot use the crutch of general knowledge outside of what was done in the movies. Movies, which I love, but are a completely different take on the source material. Insomniac not only needs to make a compelling game and story, but they need to establish who their Wolverine is in a digestible way. I think restricting the story from going down the 2 well-trodden paths I laid out will inspire something wholly unique and refreshing to the audience, showing off an entirely new side of the character not yet seen in such a big budget production. Those are my 6 suggestions. What are yours? Please drop them in the comments. I'm curious what people want to see. Also, let me know your thoughts on X-Men Origins Wolverine if you want to. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.